Hello, this video tells a story which the narrator was failed to sue him for help of his property of cheating on him after he stole his best friend, with which the woman cheating on him was his wife. It's really crazy and amazing story. Your opinion in the comments. Enjoy your viewing.
My wife failed to claim half of my property after cheating on me after the court. My best friend with whom she cheated came to me with a metal rod. Hey everyone, I'm here seeking advice and perhaps some comfort. This is a story I never thought I'd be sharing, but here we are. So, I'm Jake, 35 years old. My wife Emma and I have been married for 8 years. We met in college, she was studying literature and I was a business major. We hit it off immediately, bonding over our mutual love for hiking and outdoor adventures. Emma's the kind of person who lights up a room when she walks in, always full of energy and life. My best friend Nick and I have known each other since high school. We were practically inseparable, playing on the same soccer team and even going to the same college. He's the kind of guy who always has your back, or so I thought. Nick is a tall, athletic guy with an easygoing personality. Everyone liked him, including Emma. Nick met Emma shortly after we started dating. I introduced them one weekend when the three of us went hiking. They seemed to get along well, and I was happy that my best friend and my girlfriend could be friends too. We started hanging out as a trio, quite often barbecues, weekend trips, game nights, you name it. It was great having my two favorite people get along so well. As the years went by, Nick became a fixture in our lives. He was always around, helping out with home projects, celebrating holidays with us, and just being part of our family. He was even the best man at our wedding. I never imagined that he could betray me in such a profound way. It all started a few months ago when Emma began acting distant. She'd spend more time on her phone, texting and laughing at messages she wouldn't share with me. I brushed it off as just normal stress from work or maybe just needing some personal space. But then she started working late more often, claiming there were urgent deadlines at her job. She's a freelance graphic designer, so her hours can be erratic, but this was unusual even for her. One night, curiosity got the better of me. Emma had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went to take a shower. I noticed a message from Nick pop up, something about meeting later. My heart sank, but I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were planning something nice for me, a surprise or a gift. But the pit in my stomach wouldn't go away. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I decided to investigate further. I didn't tell Emma what I saw, and instead, I started paying closer attention to her behavior and Nick's as well. Over the next few weeks, I noticed small things that didn't add up: the way she'd smile at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, the times she'd leave the room to take a call, and how Nick seemed a bit more distant than usual. The final straw came last Friday. Emma had told me she was going to a client meeting across town and wouldn't be back until late. Nick, coincidentally, had mentioned he'd be out of town for work. Something just didn't feel right. I decided to follow Emma, feeling like a paranoid lunatic but needing to know the truth. I watched as she drove to a hotel on the outskirts of the city, not a place you'd expect a business meeting. She parked and went inside, and my worst fears were confirmed when I saw Nick's car pull up a few minutes later. He walked in casually as if this was a normal routine. My hands were shaking, and I felt like I might throw up. I waited for about an hour, sitting in my car, trying to decide what to do. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked into the hotel and asked the receptionist for a room number, pretending to be a concerned friend looking for them. Surprisingly, she gave it to me, room 214. My heart pounded as I made my way to the second floor. I stood outside the door for a moment, gathering my thoughts. What was I going to say? How was I going to confront them? I took a deep breath and knocked. There was a moment of silence, then some shuffling inside. Emma opened the door, her eyes widening in shock when she saw me. Nick was standing behind her, shirtless. The room was a mess, and it didn't take a genius to figure out what had been happening. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. Emma tried to stammer out an explanation, but there was nothing she could say that would make this better. Nick just looked at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. The betrayal hit me like a truck, and I could feel tears welling up. "How long?" I asked, barely keeping it together. Emma started to cry, saying it had been going on for a few months, that it was a mistake, that she didn't mean to hurt me. Nick tried to step forward, but I held up my hand to stop him. You were my best friend, Nick. How could you do this to me? He finally looked up, his face a mixture of shame and regret. I'm sorry, Jake. I don't know what else to say. I messed up. Messed up? That was an understatement. My mind was racing, a mix of rage and heartbreak. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to hit him, to make him feel some of the pain I was feeling, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. I trusted both of you, I said, my voice breaking. You've destroyed everything. I turned and walked away, not wanting to hear any more excuses. I got into my car and drove aimlessly for hours, trying to process what had just happened. My marriage was over, my best friend was a traitor, and I felt completely lost. When I finally got home, I packed a bag and left. I couldn't stay in that house, surrounded by memories of a life that now felt like a lie. I needed time to think, to figure out what to do next. But I knew one thing for sure, this was just the beginning of a long and painful journey. After discovering Emma's betrayal, I knew there was no turning back. The life we had built together, the dreams we shared, were all shattered. The next logical step was to file for divorce. It was a decision I made with a heavy heart but a clear mind. There was no way I could continue living a lie, and I had to protect what was left of my dignity and sanity. I come from a wealthy family, and I've been fortunate to inherit a significant amount of money from my grandparents. They had built a successful chain of luxury hotels, and their estate was worth millions. My inheritance alone was a few $1,000,000, a nest egg I had always planned to grow and eventually pass on to my own children. I worked hard, investing wisely and living a relatively modest lifestyle despite my wealth. Emma knew about my inheritance, of course, but I never thought she would try to take it from me. When I told Emma I wanted a divorce, she was initially remorseful, begging for forgiveness and a second chance. But when she realized I was resolute, her demeanor changed. She became cold and calculating, and it wasn't long before she hired a lawyer to fight for what she believed was her fair share of my assets. She wanted half of my inheritance, claiming she had a right to it because we were married. I hired my own lawyer, a seasoned professional named Linda, who had a reputation for being tough and uncompromising in divorce cases. Linda assured me that Emma had no right to my inheritance, as it was clearly stated in the will that it was to be kept separate from any marital assets. However, Emma's lawyer argued that because we had been married for 8 years and she had contributed to our household, she was entitled to a portion of it. The legal battle that ensued was long and grueling. Both sides dug in their heels, and it became a war of attrition. Emma's lawyer, a sharp and ambitious woman named Sarah, argued that Emma had sacrificed her career to support me and our household, and therefore she deserved compensation. Linda countered that Emma had her own career as a graphic designer and that our finances were always kept separate, with my inheritance being used solely for investments and savings. The courtroom became our battleground, with each side presenting evidence and witnesses to support their claims. Emma testified about the lifestyle we had enjoyed, the vacations we took, and the home we lived in. She painted a picture of herself as a supportive wife who had given up her ambitions to help me build my career. It was painful to listen to her lies, knowing the truth about her infidelity and the real reasons behind our divorce. Linda called witnesses who testified about our financial arrangements, including my accountant and financial advisor. They confirmed that my inheritance was kept separate and that Emma had her own income and career. We presented bank statements and investment records showing that the money from my inheritance was never commingled with our marital funds. Despite the clear evidence, the case dragged on for months. Emma and her lawyer continued to argue that she was entitled to half of everything, including my inheritance. The stress of the ongoing battle took its toll on me. I couldn't sleep, I lost weight, and my work suffered. It felt like my entire life was on hold, waiting for the court to decide my fate. Throughout the process, I tried to remain calm and focused, but it was difficult. Emma's attempts to paint herself as the victim and me as the villain were infuriating. She lied about our relationship, our finances, and even about how she felt about me. It was as if she had become a completely different person, someone I didn't recognize. Finally, the day came when the judge was to make a decision. I sat in the courtroom, my heart pounding, as the judge reviewed the evidence and testimonies. Linda had done an excellent job presenting our case, and I felt a glimmer of hope. But I knew that divorce cases could be unpredictable and anything could happen. The judge ruled in my favor, stating that my inheritance was indeed separate property and that Emma had no right to it. She would receive a fair settlement based on our marital assets, but she would not get a penny of my inheritance. The relief I felt was overwhelming. It was as if a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Emma, on the other hand, was furious. She had counted on getting half of my inheritance and was now left with much less than she had hoped for. To make matters worse for her, the legal fees she had incurred during the prolonged battle were substantial. Her aggressive pursuit of my inheritance had backfired, leaving her deep in debt. As the court proceedings concluded, I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. Emma's betrayal had caused me immense pain, but in the end, she couldn't take away what rightfully belonged to me. I had won, but it was a bittersweet victory. The marriage that had once been a source of joy and companionship was now reduced to a series of bitter memories and legal documents. Emma's financial situation continued to deteriorate. The debts from the legal fees and her lifestyle choices caught up with her quickly. She was forced to downsize her living arrangements and take on more work to make ends meet. The life she had envisioned, funded by half of my inheritance, was now out of reach. I, too, had to rebuild my life, but I did so with a renewed sense of determination. The divorce had been a harsh lesson in trust and betrayal, but it also reminded me of my own resilience. I threw myself into my work, focused on growing my investments, and slowly began to heal from the emotional wounds. In the aftermath of the divorce, I took some time to reflect on what had happened. The betrayal by both Emma and Nick had shaken my faith in people, but I refused to let it define me. I knew I had to move forward, to build a new life without the shadows of my past haunting me. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I realized that this chapter of my life was finally closing. The legal battles were over, and I was free to start anew. It wouldn't be easy, and the scars would always be there, but I was determined to find happiness again. I decided to sell the house that Emma and I had shared. It was too full of memories, both good and bad, and I needed a fresh start. I found a smaller place, a cozy apartment downtown, and began the process of moving. It felt symbolic, shedding the past and stepping into a new phase of my life. As for Nick, I cut all ties with him. The friendship that had meant so much to me was irreparably damaged. He tried to reach out a few times, but I ignored his calls and messages. Some things are unforgivable, and his betrayal was one of them. With Emma out of my life and the divorce finalized, I started focusing on myself. I took up new hobbies, rekindled old friendships, and even started dating again. It was a slow process, but each day felt like a step in the right direction. The journey was far from over, and I knew there would be more challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. Life after the divorce was a whirlwind of change. After the courtroom victory and the subsequent fallout, I focused on rebuilding myself. I sold the house, moved into a cozy downtown apartment, and started a new chapter of my life. I also decided it was time to take better care of myself, both physically and mentally. To that end, I joined a gym and started working out regularly. It felt good to channel my energy into something positive and see tangible results. About 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I met someone new. Her name was Laura. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue, and we clicked immediately. Laura was smart, funny, and had a kind heart. She worked as a nurse, and her compassionate nature was a breath of fresh air after everything I had been through. We started dating, and she quickly became an important part of my life. Laura's presence in my life was a soothing balm to my wounded soul. We spent a lot of time together, and she helped me find joy in the little things again. Her laughter was infectious, and her positive outlook on life was something I desperately needed. She encouraged me to keep up with my workouts, often joining me for morning runs or yoga sessions. Our relationship grew stronger with each passing day, and I began to see a future with her that was filled with hope and happiness. One evening, after a particularly intense workout at the gym, I decided to walk home. It was a crisp autumn night, and the fresh air felt good after the stuffy atmosphere of the gym. As I walked through the park, lost in my thoughts, I heard a voice call out my name. I turned around and saw Nick walking towards me. I hadn't seen him since the divorce proceedings, and seeing him now brought a flood of emotions. "Jake, long time no see," he said, a strained smile on his face. I nodded, unsure of what to say. The wounds of his betrayal were still fresh, and I didn't trust myself to speak without letting my anger show. "Listen, I know things ended badly between us," Nick began, "but I wanted to tell you something. I got married to Emma. We tried to make it work despite everything, but man, it's been tough. Her debts are overwhelming, and it's been a struggle." Hearing this, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. Part of me was glad that karma had come around, but another part of me felt sorry for the mess that they had made of their lives. "Nick, you made your choices," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You both did. I hope you figure things out, but I can't pretend that everything is okay between us." Nick's face twisted with a mixture of anger and desperation. "You think you're so high and mighty, don't you? With your new life and your fancy new girlfriend. You have no idea what we've been through." Before I could respond, he reached into his bag and pulled out a metal rod. My heart raced as I realized what was happening. He swung the rod at me, and I barely managed to dodge the first blow. The second swing caught me on the shoulder, sending a jolt of pain through my body. "Nick, stop!" I shouted, trying to back away, but he was relentless. He swung again, this time hitting my side. I stumbled, trying to defend myself, but the pain was overwhelming. People in the park started to notice the commotion. A couple of joggers and a woman walking her dog stopped and stared, unsure of what to do. Nick's rage was uncontainable, and he kept swinging the rod, landing blow after blow. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, a figure dashed forward and tackled Nick to the ground. It was Max, a guy I knew from the gym. He was a personal trainer and built like a tank. He pinned Nick down with ease, shouting for someone to call the police. "Jake, are you okay?" Max asked, concern in his eyes. I nodded weakly, grateful for his intervention but too pained to speak. Another bystander, an older man named Tom, who often walked his dog in the park, had already called 911. The police arrived within minutes, and Nick was handcuffed and taken away, still shouting obscenities. An ambulance arrived shortly after, and the paramedics quickly assessed my injuries. Laura, who was on duty at the hospital, rushed to meet me once she heard what had happened. She held my hand as the paramedics worked, her eyes filled with worry. At the hospital, I was treated for multiple bruises and a few cracked ribs. The doctors assured me that I would recover, but I knew it would take time. Laura stayed by my side the entire time, her presence a comforting reminder that I wasn't alone. Nick was charged with assault and battery. The trial was swift, and he was sentenced to a few years in prison. It was a sad end to what was once a deep friendship, but I knew it was for the best. He had become a danger to himself and others, and he needed help. The days and weeks that followed were tough. Recovery was slow, and the emotional scars ran deep. But with Laura's support, I managed to pull through. I continued going to the gym, albeit more cautiously, and focused on rebuilding my strength. During my recovery, I received an outpouring of support from friends and family. Even some of my colleagues, who had been aware of the tumultuous events in my personal life, reached out to offer their help. It was heartening to know that I had such a strong support system. Laura was my rock. She was there for every doctor's appointment, every moment of doubt, and every step of my healing process. Her unwavering support and love gave me the strength to keep going. We spent countless evenings talking about our future, dreaming about the life we wanted to build together. One evening, as Laura and I sat on the balcony of my apartment watching the sunset, I reflected on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the legal battles, the assault, it had all been a nightmare. But through it all, I had found a new sense of purpose and resilience. "Do you ever think about what might have been?" Laura asked softly, her hand in mine. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I try not to dwell on it. What's important is that I've moved on. I've found you, and I'm finally at peace with everything that's happened." She smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad you found me too, Jake. We've both been through a lot, but we've got each other now, and that's all that matters." As we sat there, the city lights twinkling in the distance, I felt a sense of closure. The past was behind me, and the future was filled with endless possibilities. I knew there would be more challenges ahead, but I was ready to face them with Laura by my side. However, the journey was far from over. The legal ramifications of Nick's actions were still unfolding, and I was determined to see it through. My lawyer, Linda, was confident that we could hold Nick accountable not just for the assault, but for the emotional and physical damages I had suffered. One day, while Laura was at work, I received a call from Linda. She had some news about the case. "Jake, I've got some updates," she said. "We've been able to gather enough evidence to pursue additional charges against Nick. Given the severity of his actions and his previous behavior, we have a strong case for a significant settlement." I was relieved to hear this. It wasn't about the money, it was about ensuring that Nick faced the consequences of his actions. The legal battle had taken a toll on me, but knowing that justice was being served made it all worthwhile. Meanwhile, my relationship with Laura continued to blossom. We took weekend trips together, exploring new places and creating new memories. She introduced me to her family, and they welcomed me with open arms. It felt good to be part of a loving and supportive community again. One weekend, we decided to go hiking in the mountains, a favorite pastime of mine that I hadn't indulged in for a long time. The fresh air and stunning views were a reminder of the beauty in life, even after all the hardship. As we reached the summit, Laura turned to me with a smile. "Jake, I've been thinking," she said. "We've both been through so much. But I believe that everything happens for a reason. Meeting you has been the best thing that ever happened to me." I felt a warmth in my heart that I hadn't felt in years. "I feel the same way, Laura. You've brought so much joy and light into my life. I can't imagine my future without you." As we stood there, looking out over the vast landscape, I realized that I had truly found happiness again. The past was a series of lessons that had shaped me into the person I was now, stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever came next. Back in the city, the legal proceedings continued. Linda's relentless efforts paid off, and we secured a significant settlement from Nick. He was held accountable for his actions, both financially and legally. It was a victory, but more importantly, it was a closure. With the settlement, I decided to invest in a new venture. I had always been passionate about helping others, and I saw this as an opportunity to make a difference. I started a nonprofit organization focused on providing support and resources for individuals going through difficult divorces and domestic abuse situations. It was my way of giving back and turning my pain into something positive. The organization grew quickly, and I was able to help many people who were in similar situations to mine. It was incredibly fulfilling work, and it gave me a renewed sense of purpose. Laura was supportive every step of the way, often volunteering her time and expertise to help out. One day, as we were setting up for a fundraising event, Laura pulled me aside. "Jake, I've been thinking about something," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "What's that?" I asked, curious. "How would you feel about taking our relationship to the next level?" she asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice. I was taken aback, but in the best possible way. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" She nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "Yes, I love you, Jake, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." I felt a rush of emotion, and without hesitation, I pulled her into a tight embrace. "I love you too, Laura, more than anything. Yes, let's do this." A few months later, we were married in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. It was a beautiful day, filled with love and laughter. As we exchanged our vows, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the journey that had brought us together. Life was good. The nonprofit was thriving, and Laura and I were happier than ever. We moved into a new house, one that we had picked out together, and started planning for our future. There was talk of starting a family, something that filled me with both excitement and a little bit of fear. But with Laura by my side, I knew we could handle anything. One evening, as we sat on our porch watching the sunset, I reflected on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the legal battles, the assault, it had all been a nightmare. But through it all, I had found a new sense of purpose and resilience. "Do you ever think about what might have been?" Laura asked softly, her hand in mine. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I try not to dwell on it. What's important is that I've moved on. I've found you, and I'm finally at peace with everything that's happened." She smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad you found me too, Jake. We've both been through a lot, but we've got each other now, and that's all that matters." As we sat there, the city lights twinkling in the distance, I felt a sense of closure. The past was behind me, and the future was filled with endless possibilities. I knew there would be more challenges ahead, but I was ready to face them, with Laura by my side. In the end, life is about resilience and the ability to adapt and move forward. No matter how many times you get knocked down, it's the getting back up that defines you. And I was determined to keep getting back up, stronger and more determined than ever.
Hello everyone, it's really a crazy and interesting story. What do you think? Like and subscribe to this channel on Instagram and Discord. Good luck!